The world James had carefully rebuilt after his wife Sophia's death during childbirth was crumbling before his eyes. In one moment, everything he thought he knew about his stern but fair employer shattered, leaving him facing the potential loss of both his high-stakes engineering job that paid for Emma's medical bills and possibly custody of his daughter if authorities deemed him negligent for the unusual childcare arrangement. "What are you doing with my daughter?" he whispered, his voice breaking as Vanessa looked up with tears streaming down her face. "James, I can explain," Vanessa said, gently adjusting Emma in her arms. "I lost my own baby girl 3 months ago. The milk, it never stopped." The 38-year-old executive's normally immaculate appearance, her tailored navy suit and perfectly styled auburn hair, contrasted sharply with the vulnerability now evident in her trembling hands. "When your regular sitter called in sick and I heard Emma crying in the company daycare. I couldn't help myself." James, a 34-year-old widower with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled button-down that hadn't seen an iron in weeks, felt his anger giving way to confusion. The daycare supervisor had called in sick, and he'd been desperate enough to bring Emma to work despite her being colicky all morning. But how had Vanessa gained access to his child? And why hadn't anyone notified him? The mystery deepened when he noticed a familiar stuffed rabbit on Vanessa's desk, one he thought he'd lost at home weeks ago. As the company's quarterly presentation loomed just hours away, James faced an impossible choice: confront his boss about this bizarre boundary violation or pretend he never saw it to protect his career. With his mortgage already 2 months behind and Emma's specialized formula costing more than he could afford, the stakes couldn't be higher. "I need to understand what's happening here," he said, closing the office door behind him. What James didn't know was that Vanessa Thompson had been watching him for months, her interest far exceeding that of a typical employer-employee relationship. The photograph on her desk partially hidden behind a stack of reports showed a younger Vanessa standing next to a woman who looked remarkably like James's late wife, a connection that would turn both their worlds upside down. "Your wife Sophia was my half-sister," Vanessa revealed, her voice barely audible over Emma's contented cooing. "We were separated as children during our parents' divorce. I only found out about her death when I saw your employment application with her listed as your emergency contact. By then, it was too late to attend the funeral." She gently stroked Emma's cheek. "This little girl is my only living connection to the sister I never got to know." James staggered backward, gripping the edge of Vanessa's desk for support. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. His boss was his daughter's aunt? The woman who had been demanding overtime and pushing impossible deadlines was actually family? His mind raced through every interaction they'd had over the past year, searching for signs he might have missed. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. The tension in the room was interrupted by Emma's happy gurgle as she reached up to touch Vanessa's face, seemingly content in a way James hadn't seen since Sophia's passing. The baby's actions created a moment of connection that neither adult could ignore, a silent acknowledgement that perhaps this strange circumstance might somehow be healing for all of them. "I was afraid," Vanessa admitted, her professional facade crumbling completely. "Afraid you'd think I hired you out of pity. Afraid you'd reject any help I offered. Afraid of loving this little girl and losing her too, just like I lost my sister and my own baby." The 5 feet 7 inches executive with her perfectly manicured nails and designer watch suddenly looked small and vulnerable in her expensive leather chair. "I've been leaving little gifts in your office, the formula coupons, the daycare scholarship application. I thought I was helping from a distance." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office, James made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. Instead of reporting Vanessa's inappropriate behavior, he pulled up a chair beside her and asked her to tell him everything about the sister he thought had no family. The quarterly presentation came and went without either of them, the corporate emergency fading into insignificance against the backdrop of their shared grief and unexpected connection. James listened, transfixed, as Vanessa recounted fragments of Sophia's childhood he'd never heard before. "She always wore her hair in 2 braids until she was 10, Vanessa said, her eyes distant with memory. And she was terrified of thunderstorms. Our father would wrap her in a blanket and tell her stories until she fell asleep. Each detail was a precious gift, filling in pieces of his wife's history that had been lost to him. Sophia never mentioned a sister, James said softly, the hurt evident in his voice. We were together for 7 years. Why would she keep that from me? Vanessa's expression clouded. Our parents' divorce was ugly. My mother took me to California, and Sophia stayed with our father in Boston. There were restraining orders, accusations. She swallowed hard. By the time I was old enough to search for her independently, she had changed her name from Sophia Thompson to Sophia Reynolds, our grandmother's maiden name. I only found traces of her online after college. That explains why her birth certificate looked amended, James murmured, remembering his confusion when they'd applied for their marriage license. She told me it was a clerical error. Emma began to fuss, breaking the heavy moment. Without thinking, James reached for his daughter, and Vanessa transferred her with practiced ease. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, neither moved away. The touch was electric, not romantic, but charged with the recognition of shared blood and shared loss. I have photos, Vanessa said suddenly. From before the separation. Would you like to see them sometime? James nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The thought of seeing Sophia as a child, of having these missing pieces of her life restored, was overwhelming. Emma should know where she comes from, he managed finally. All of it. The next morning, James arrived at work to find the office buzzing with speculation about why both he and the CEO had missed the crucial quarterly presentation. Thomas Westfield, the ambitious vice president of operations who had long coveted Vanessa's position, cornered James by the coffee machine. Quite the coincidence that both you and Thompson disappeared yesterday, the 45-year-old executive said, his expensive cologne almost suffocating in the small break room. Especially given how she's been singling you out for special projects lately. His implication hung in the air, ugly and insinuating. James felt his face flush with anger. Ms. Thompson had a family emergency, he said stiffly. And I had childcare issues. Nothing more. Thomas raised an eyebrow, his perfectly tailored suit making James acutely aware of his own rumpled appearance. Family emergency? Funny, I wasn't aware she had any family. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Word of advice, Parker. Whatever's going on between you two, keep it professional. The board doesn't look kindly on workplace relationships, especially between executives and subordinates. James wanted to explain, to defend both himself and Vanessa, but the truth was too personal, too raw to share in the company break room. Instead, he mumbled something non-committal and escaped to his office, where he found a small envelope on his desk. Inside was a security pass for the executive parking garage and a note in Vanessa's precise handwriting, to make morning drop-offs easier. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, addressing a daily struggle he'd never mentioned, made his throat tight. It was exactly the kind of thing Sophia would have done. That evening, as James was preparing to leave, Vanessa appeared in his doorway. Gone was the intimidating CEO in her power suit. Instead, she wore casual slacks and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. I thought maybe we could talk more, she said hesitantly. I brought those photos I mentioned. They ended up at a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the office, Emma sleeping peacefully in her stroller. Vanessa pulled out a worn photo album, handling it with reverence. I've carried this with me through 4 cities and 6 apartments, she explained, opening to the first page. James gasped softly at the image of 2 little girls, one unmistakably Sophia with her heart-shaped face and serious eyes, the other clearly Vanessa, taller and more confident even then. They were building a sandcastle on a beach, their matching sundresses covered in sand. Cape Cod, summer of '93, Vanessa said. Our last vacation as a family. Page after page revealed moments of Sophia's life James had never known existed, her 5th birthday party with a unicorn cake, her first day of school clutching a lunchbox with rainbows, a Christmas morning with both girls in matching pajamas. Each image was a window into the woman he'd loved, showing the foundations of the person she'd become. She loved the ocean even then, James said, pointing to a picture of Sophia wading fearlessly into waves. We spent our honeymoon in Maui, and I could barely get her out of the water. Vanessa smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually stern features. That's why I moved to Seattle after business school. The water reminded me of her, somehow. As they talked, the barriers between them, boss and employee, stranger and family, began to dissolve. They shared stories late into the evening, until Emma woke demanding attention. Without hesitation, Vanessa reached for the diaper bag, extracting a bottle and warming it with the efficiency of someone who had done it countless times before. "You're good with her," James observed, watching as Vanessa tested the temperature on her wrist. "I had Olivia for 4 months," she said quietly, naming her lost daughter for the first time. "Not long, but long enough to learn." She handed the bottle to James, their fingers brushing again. "Would you mind if I came by sometimes? To see Emma? And maybe to help out?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Accepting would mean acknowledging this new reality, that his boss was family, that his daughter had an aunt, that their lives were now intertwined in ways that went far beyond the professional. "I think Sophia would have wanted that," he said finally. "And honestly, I could use the help." The relief on Vanessa's face was palpable. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." What began as occasional evening visits soon evolved into a routine. Vanessa would come by James's modest 2-bedroom apartment 3 or 4 nights a week, bringing dinner and staying to help with Emma's bedtime. She never again attempted to nurse the baby, that boundary remained clear, but in every other way, she slipped into the role of devoted aunt with natural ease. For James, having another adult in the house was both a relief and a revelation. The crushing isolation of single parenthood eased as Vanessa shared the load, taking Emma for walks so he could shower in peace, washing bottles while he folded laundry, staying with the sleeping baby so he could make a quick grocery run. Small luxuries he'd forgotten were possible. At work, they maintained a careful professional distance, but rumors persisted. Thomas Westfield watched their interactions with calculating eyes, noting how Vanessa's criticism of James's work had softened, how she consulted him on projects outside his usual scope, how they occasionally arrived or left at the same time. 6 weeks after the revelation in Vanessa's office, the situation came to a head during a tense executive meeting. James was presenting his team's findings on a new product line when Thomas interrupted. "I'm curious why Parker's department gets priority funding when his metrics are middle of the pack at best," he said, his tone deceptively casual. "Is there some personal reason for your confidence in him, Vanessa?" The room fell silent, the implication hanging in the air. Vanessa's expression remained impassive, but James saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped her pen. "If you're questioning my professional judgment, Thomas, I suggest you review the projection models James's team developed," she said coolly. "They show a 22% higher ROI than any other proposal on the table. Unless you have actual data to present rather than insinuations, I'd prefer we stick to business." The meeting continued, but the damage was done. As executives filed out, James overheard whispers, "sleeping her way to the top," and "midlife crisis," and "widow with a sob story." Each comment stung, not just for himself but for Vanessa, whose hard-earned reputation was being tarnished by their connection. That night, when Vanessa arrived at his apartment, James met her at the door with a troubled expression. "We need to talk," he said, leading her to the living room where Emma was already asleep in her playpen. "I heard the rumors," Vanessa said before he could speak. "Thomas came to my office after the meeting, concerned about appearances." Her air quotes made her contempt clear. "Maybe we should cool things down," James suggested reluctantly. "At least at work. I could transfer to another department, or..." No, Vanessa interrupted, her voice firm. I won't let office politics dictate my relationship with my niece. Or with you. She hesitated, then added softly, you and Emma are the only family I have left. I'm not giving that up because Thomas Westfield is threatened by our connection. The conviction in her voice stirred something in James, admiration, gratitude, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. What do we do, then? Vanessa took a deep breath. We tell the truth. Not everything, that's private. But enough. I've scheduled a meeting with HR tomorrow to disclose our family relationship and request appropriate accommodations to avoid conflicts of interest. The formal approach was so typically Vanessa that James couldn't help smiling. Always the CEO, he teased gently. She smiled back, relaxing slightly. It's who I am. Just like being Emma's father is who you are. Her expression grew serious again. But there's something else we need to discuss. I've been thinking about making it official, filing for aunt visitation rights. It would protect my relationship with Emma if anything ever happened between us professionally. The legal implications gave James pause. That's a big step, he said cautiously. I know, Vanessa acknowledged. And I wouldn't ask if it weren't important to me. Emma is, she's my connection to Sophia, yes, but she's also become precious to me in her own right. Her voice wavered slightly. After losing Olivia, I never thought I'd feel this way about a child again. But Emma, she's family. The vulnerability in her admission touched James deeply. This woman who commanded boardrooms and managed multi-million-dollar deals was laying her heart bare, asking not for corporate approval but for a place in their lives. Let me think about it, he said gently. It's not that I don't want you in Emma's life. I do. You've been amazing with her. It's just, making it legal feels like a big commitment. Vanessa nodded, accepting his hesitation without argument. Of course. Take all the time you need. 3 months later, James stood nervously in the courthouse, Emma dressed in a tiny floral outfit in his arms, as he waited for the judge to approve Vanessa's petition for aunt visitation rights, a formal acknowledgement of her place in their lives. The journey from that shocking moment in her office to this legal proceeding had been filled with tears, late-night conversations, and slowly building trust as they navigated their grief together. The court recognizes Vanessa Thompson as Emma Parker's maternal aunt and grants the visitation schedule as outlined in the petition, the judge announced, bringing official recognition to what had already become their reality. As they exited the courthouse, Vanessa's hand rested lightly on James's shoulder, a touch that had once been unimaginable but now felt like the most natural thing in the world. What began as a shocking discovery had transformed into something beautiful, a makeshift family built from the ashes of loss. Emma now had not only her father's devoted care but also the love of an aunt who connected her to the mother she would never know. And James, who had been drowning in single parenthood, found not only help with Emma but also someone who understood his grief in a way no one else could. I never thought I'd say this, James confessed one evening as they sat on his porch swing, Emma sleeping peacefully between them, but finding you that day with Emma might have been the best thing that could have happened to us. The 34-year-old father looked years younger now, his button-down crisp and his eyes clear as he gazed at the sunset. Sometimes the most shocking moments lead us exactly where we need to be. Vanessa smiled, her professional armor long since abandoned in James's presence. Family comes in unexpected packages, she replied, gently adjusting Emma's blanket. And sometimes the things that seem most wrong at first glance turn out to be exactly what we need. Their story, one that began with shock and potential scandal, evolved into a testament to how love can grow in the most unexpected.